Hi everyone, it's Rosie from Talking About BPD, and today it's day 8 of 14 days of DBT, over halfway through, and the topic for today is a skill called cope ahead, not to be confused with plan ahead. So I'm going to share my understanding of cope ahead, the way my therapist taught me. I know that there are some other ways of doing this, and I think that's what people call plan ahead or cope ahead. Like sometimes those skills are mixed up or used interchangeably, or like have a different name for the same thing. So I will just explain how I do cope ahead, what cope ahead means to me, and then I will briefly explain plan ahead and how it differs in my understanding of these skills. So, cope ahead is really effective when you're worrying about something happening, like a worst case scenario, and you just find your brain constantly thinking about the worst thing happening, and it's just so vivid and it's just so all consuming, and it's when you're preoccupied by something really bad happening, and yeah, even just thinking about it is just making me feel tense, because I do spend a lot of time worrying about worst case scenarios and like worst fears. So cope ahead is really, really helpful when you find yourself in that kind of state of mind where you just think everything that could go wrong is going wrong, and you're just worrying about what that will be like for you. So cope ahead is like almost a counterintuitive way of approaching this problem. So quite often when you're worrying about a worst case scenario, people say to me like, think positive, or oh, that probably won't happen, like that's very unlikely, just think positive, like just notice the positives. To me, that just doesn't help, really. Rarely. It just doesn't take away the power of the fear. The power of the fear is still so huge and so vivid and dramatic and kind of like so big in my mind. It's like a cinematic movie just playing out. It's just so vivid and real. So cope ahead is a skill that tells me to imagine in vivid detail, as much detail as I can, the worst case scenario happening. So you can write it down, you can think about it, give yourself a time limit, say like 5-10 minutes, to just think, okay, this is the worst case scenario. What would that look like? What would that sound like? What would people say? How would it feel? Right? To just like allow yourself, give yourself permission to go into that worst case scenario instead of trying to block it out, right? So you grant yourself access in your mind to that worst case scenario, like fear. Then comes the twist. So you imagine coping with it. So you've imagined the worst things happening, and now you imagine what would you do, or what would you say and think and act to manage this situation. And then you visualize yourself in that worst case scenario doing things to cope, and you see yourself in your mind's eye actually managing the situation. And oh my god, this is a hard thing to do, but the payoff is so big, right? So how not to do cope ahead is to imagine the worst case scenario and then imagine yourself just not coping at all. That's not cope ahead. The twist of cope ahead is that you imagine yourself being able to cope, and you see yourself doing things or taking actions that show that you are actually coping. So for example, for me, worst fear, imagine like all my friends, all my family, my lovely partner just turning their back on me and saying, Rosie, we hate you, we do not want to see you ever again, get out of my life, right? I imagine this happening, and I go into all the details about that in my mind, and then I imagine, okay, if that happened, what would I do? Like, how would I cope? How could I cope? And how can I cope if that does actually happen? And yeah, like I could actually make new friends if that happened. Like I could actually make new friends and cope. Like I would actually be able to survive that if that did happen. Obviously it's unlikely to happen, but my brain still takes me to a place where I just fear that happening. But cope ahead, when I remind myself, like, yeah, actually, if that did happen, like I could, do this, that, the other to survive. Like, I could rely on myself. As hard as it would be, I wouldn't actually not cope. It would be hard, it would be devastating, it would be awful, but I could actually cope, and many people have coped with awful things in life, and they have come through it, and they have come out stronger at times. So, plan ahead is where you plan for the worst case scenario happening. So it's kind of similar, but for me, plan ahead is more like making a coping plan. So say, for example, I don't know, you have a busy day, like you're going to, I don't know, a party or something, and you're planning ahead for what you can do to manage. So it might be saying like, I'll eat beforehand, I will have, you know, I'll bring this with me, like I'll go with so-and-so person, like I'll have a way of making a quick exit if I need to. I'll be able to take breaks by like going on a little walk. That to me is plan ahead, whereas cope ahead is, for me, is this visualization of worst case scenario plus coping. You can write it down if it helps you, and also it's recommended to do something relaxing afterwards, because it can be quite stressful to take your mind into such a vivid daydream, or like a day nightmare of your worst case scenario. So yeah, let me know what you think about this skill. I would love to hear from you, and yeah, hope you join me for another video soon. Bye.